I was going to say that I saw a video, news video recently of a meeting between some high officials. And I do my best to just watch as I would listen to a client, without judgment, because I want to be able to really see what's going on as best I can. And if I'm judging it as I'm seeing it, then I'll miss things. So I just tried to watch what was going on. And what I saw was narcissism unbelievably at work. I mean, it was orchestrated, it was plotted out, it was specifically designed to undermine the other person. It had nothing to do with principles, it had nothing to do with strategy, it had nothing to do with the concern of how their comments and thoughts and actions would affect other people. It was amazing. And it's like, there was one person there was a meeting between these three people, and two of them, it's like they had decided on a strategy for the meeting, and they executed the strategy. They had a good cop and a bad cop. And actually, I strongly suspect that they aren't smart enough to come up with this. They had to consult with somebody else. The bad cop was the second in command, and the good guy was the first in command. So it was the guy who was second in command who was just casting aspersions and started to attack this other guy's character, not discussing whatsoever what the principles were. And so then the good cop just kind of agrees with the other guy, right? So the good cop can't really be blamed for making those accusations. It was extraordinary. And what boggles my mind about two things. One is it redoubled my appropriateness of choosing this topic today in terms of conscience, but also we if we don't read what's going on in the news through the lens of psychology, we'll never understand it. We take a look back over it's called politics, but politics are the actions of human beings, and human beings basically are psychological beings. And if we don't understand, even the smartest, I think wisest reporters and commentators and op-ed people don't really get that there's narcissism that's going on, and that narcissism is a different breed of human being, pretty much. It doesn't really have a conscience. So how do you talk or negotiate or do anything in a meaningful way with somebody who doesn't have a conscience? And that's really, nobody seems to really get that. And so they deal with the situation as if it's just a person or a person in whatever position they're in. It muddles everything because the narcissist wins because everything's being played by their rules and not anybody else's. And everybody else is going to scratching their head. What are they doing? What are they thinking? What is this going to be? And it's like, no. It's just sheer narcissism. So, as I said in the email, I want to, there's two reasons why I want to do, and we're going to look at two different aspects of conscience. And one is our own conscience and taking a look at what that is and how it arises and how can we pay attention to and keep good housekeeping, so to speak, in our conscience, so we don't have things hanging on that we go, oh, it's not that bad, It's just, and that's just like, you spill something or leave something on the floor, and it's just a little bit, it's just a little 2 or 3 inches of mess over there in the corner, but you just leave it there, right? We wouldn't do that. We'd wipe it up. And so with our conscience, even the small stuff is really important because the stuff can grow there, so to speak. It affects how we think and about ourselves and how we interact with the world to some degree. So it's going to have a large effect no matter what size it is. And the larger aspects of our conscience when it's bothered are kind of obvious, and then we get stuck in a loop. Oh, that was terrible, and they can't believe they did that, and boom, and we stop right there, and it doesn't get resolved, so we go back to the original thought and the dynamics. And then that gets activated again, and we go back, and they're terrible. Oh, this is awful. I can't believe it. Boom, and we go back to the beginning. We do this over and over and over again. So the idea is to keep our conscience clear. When we get to this low point, then it's time to figure out how to resolve this conscience, and we come the rest of the way and resolve it so that our conscience is clear. Now, there's all kinds of wonderful research on what happens when our conscience isn't clear. So it's pretty clear that having a clear conscience is a really good idea. and it's really good personal and spiritual housekeeping to make sure that we don't have any clingers or things hanging on and that sort of stuff. That whatever's bothering our conscience we pay attention to in the attempt to resolve it. Now, we've talked a number of times here too, it's like, yes, my conscience really bothered by X, Y, and Z, but I don't know what to do. I can't do anything about it. Well, not so. Now, if we think about changing the world, or changing the legislation, or changing whatever, that's correct. We don't have any power over that whatsoever. But we do have power. Pick your least favorite politician, okay, historically or currently, right? And you think of them, and it raises this antipathy. It bothers our conscience that they're doing X, Y, and Z. Well, the problem is in our brain. It's not out there in the world. Because we don't have anything, we can't do anything about what somebody's going to do in whatever capacity they're serving. But it's what's going on in our mind that's the important thing. Because that's our world. We carry these our little worlds around with us, and if it's disturbed, and we think in a disturbed way, and we feel in a disturbed way, and it's hard to sort things out sometimes, that somebody will be sort of like that person, and then that'll activate our attitudes about this person, and we'll project them onto that person, and it's mucky. And plus, as I say frequently, and I can't overemphasize, is that when we're feeling helpless, it's just not good for us in any regard. It's okay at the beginning to go, okay, I'm helpless in this situation, what can I do? And then we'll get busy doing something, whatever we can. To realize helplessness is important, but to get stuck in helplessness is not good. And it kind of pall over everything that we think and do. So what it comes down to, when our conscience is offended, then it comes down to what can I do about it, and then figuring out what the right thing is to do. And it doesn't matter what it is. And it's really not about fixing that out there per se. It's really about fixing what's going on in here. Why am I so upset by this? And what can I do about my own life? And what can I do to make a contribution here in my own life and those close to me and anybody that I might be able to touch? And so in that manner, I see this, in large part, as part of my contribution, talking about this stuff. And that's the first part. Having a clear conscience is super important. So the first thing we'll do is an exercise, compassion exercise, focusing on conscience. The second is more difficult, and I thought about waiting to reveal the punchline, but I don't want to sandbag anybody. But we've talked a number of times about this topic, and it comes up that it's just people out there that are committing heinous crimes, and have committed and apparently will continue to commit heinous crimes. It really offends our conscience. And it's a reality, and it's something that's the world in which we live right now. So for our own well-being, we've got to figure out how to deal with that. And so, like a moment ago, what can we do? One thing is to shift our perspective, because why do people do things that harm other people? In general. Having worked, as I say frequently, working with people who have addictions and alcoholism and stuff, and that they do terrible things when they're under the influence. I mean, just tragically awful. just taking a snapshot of their behavior in their worst moments, we go, you got to ship this person off to Siberia. This isn't going to work. This guy or gal is just totally irredeemable. And what we know is that through recovery, that's simply not true. That there's enormous, human growth potential in that individual, should they choose to take that path. And that's the rub, because somebody has the right to drink themselves to death and make everybody miserable and die a tragic death. That's one of the options that we have. And then they also have the option to do whatever work it takes to not do that, and to clean things up and make amends for the past and change their behavior and make a contribution to society. Because I don't know if I said this much, but all the 12-step programs have one mission ultimately, and that is for whoever gets sober or cleans up or whatever to help other people do so. That's it. And everything else is to serve that. So the whole 12-step thing is really about developing compassion in people and helping them find the ability to be able to do that and be compassionate toward other people. So when we take a look at Assad Bashir's handling of the war in Syria, biochemical weapons on his own people and bombing hospitals, and when they'd move to a different hospital, he bombed that hospital until they finally all the hospitals were eliminated. Inconceivable harm. And so how are we going to handle that? What is going on with somebody like that? We can name it, we can call it sociopathic/psychopathic behavior, and it fits all the DSM criteria for that. But it still doesn't give us resolution to how we feel about it. We can name it and picture it and understand the dynamics and all that, but the feeling is still, we're just incredulous that somebody could possibly do that. So then I was thinking about, why do people, sort of drunk with power, do things without any consideration of their negative impact on others? Well, and I was thinking about that, and it seems to me that there's only one reason that could happen, which is that they are disconnected from their own nature, which is the nature that we all share, and because they don't have that connection to other beings, life forms, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's it's a game of chess, and it's not about being in harmony with nature or what the needs are of others and how to serve others. It's just moving things around on the chessboard and feeding their ego. So, that means that they are in a unredeemed state, let's call it, in a way that sort of hints that there may be a solution for them at some point, a spiritual solution, but they ain't in it now, that's for sure. And this was something we'll talk about too with conscience. What gives us conscience is this connection with our with our authentic nature, our authentic self, our true nature, and that is connected to everything else. So that gives us a conscience for, let's say a bird flies in the window. We don't try to kill it. We try to capture it and take it out the window. Even cockroaches I've taken to just scooping them up in a Tupperware and tossing them outside and telling them they'll never come back. but we're sensitive when we have this connection with our own nature, our true nature, our authentic self. Conscience works pretty good. We can really tell right and wrong from the consequences and the outcomes. And very often we can ask if we're still having trouble with that, we can say, well, how would I feel in their circumstances? And because we do have a connection, we can imagine what it would be like for somebody to be in that position, how we would feel, and go, oh, I got it. And as an extension of that, I'm thinking about the people who are doing these terrible things and are just positioning. There's like 5 or 6 world leaders that are, I think, just Right now they're not fighting each other, but they will be, because there can only be one king of the hill. And that one person, that one country, is going to have subservient countries. And the subservient countries aren't going to like that. And that's just kind of the way we work as human nature. What the problem is they don't have any idea, they don't have any resonant connection to the suffering that they are wreaking upon other people. No concept. Zero. And there's nothing we can do about that. If somebody's deaf, dumb, and blind to the suffering of others, something's got to happen to help them wake up, but we can't do it. And I felt this, I felt real conflict of conscience when thinking about some of these people. I'm feeling a sense of anger and rage sometimes, and how incredulous I am about some of this behavior. And I don't like that. In other words, I don't like feeling like that. I don't like carrying an anger and resentment and stuff along that. And so I had to find a way out of it. I had to find a way that I could not run from reality, but not get sucked into it. And that seems to be the scale. And right in the middle is compassion. It's realizing that they are a human being like everybody else, except they have our next door neighbor may be kind of mean and intrusive and uncooperative, same thing. And but whether it's our next door neighbor who has very little control, to somebody who has control of a lot of stuff and can affect a lot of people's lives, it's the same thing. They have no connection with their own nature, therefore they don't understand the suffering of others. And so that's the point I've come to, and that's really helped my conscience to be able to accept what's going on and to just simply ask, how can I help? Is there anything I can do to help this situation? And whether that's doing volunteer work at your local homeless shelter or whatever it may be, whatever you're guided to do. And I think that's a really important part too, is that there's something that we can do that's uniquely suited to our talents and gifts and experience. And whatever that may be, I don't know. But that's for everyone. And some of the stories from World War II are really pretty amazing about some of the people who got involved in the underground. They weren't particularly firebrands in the beginning, but they just said, I've got to do something. They got involved in the underground. They wanted to fight Hitler and fascism. Some of them did remarkable things. And they were driven to do that. But not everyone was. Right? So other people stayed home and took care of the kids, basically, and took care of the families and provided what they could for the families, while these other folks went out and did this paramilitary stuff to stop fascism. So whatever role we play, it's not something we can particularly cook up in our own mind. It's something that sort of floats to the surface, given our good intentions to do something about what's going on. So that's part one. And part two is to realize that people in positions of power are no different than the homeless person you see on the street. No different whatsoever. They just have a different view of things. They're really not any different than you and I. I mean, I have clients all the time that talk about they're ashamed of something, or they made a terrible mistake, they feel really bad about it. And I said, well, look, go to Grand Central Station where there's thousands of people and go there, for 10 to 12 hours and ask every single person you see if they ever done something they deeply regretted and that they're really shameful of. Everybody's going to say yes, right? So this phenomenon is not new to human experience. And so they're, in a sense, are really not any different than you or me. The difference is that they got a lot more influence and power over human lives and systems, large systems and things like that. We got a household maybe, or a house, or something like that, but we can't call somebody up and change the lives of 2 or 3 million people. I mean, that's just, we don't have that capacity. And I'm glad I don't. So, the first step is to take a look at our own conscience and apply that compassion to ourselves. The second is a big ask, to choose your favorite tyrant. And that can be somebody and again, on a scale of 1 to 10, pick something relatively mild so that we don't get overwhelmed by the emotions. And I know most people do that, and inevitably some people don't. They pick the worst case scenario. But to work on this so that we can begin to see, and it's hard to do this because we're so deeply offended and horrified by some people's behavior. It's difficult to do this, but I think it's important to practice. And in the first go, you may notice no difference whatsoever. Okay, but it's still practice. And if we could at least introduce the idea of what we're talking about, then that can be helpful, and that can grow. And the delusion of people in a position of power that they are different from other people. And that's the delusion. And they don't know they're suffering that delusion. They're reveling in their individuality, so to speak, which, from my perspective, is reveling in their ignorance. But it takes a while to be able to see that, and it takes a lot of work. First, we have to be compassionate with ourselves, is my premise. So we'll start. And so people find a comfortable position, one where you don't have to move any muscles to remain comfortable. And we'll begin. And sort of following the sound of the bell as it settles into silence. Just allowing ourselves to drop into this space of neutrality. And when thoughts arise or emotions arise, just recognizing them and letting them go as best you can. And sometimes they may be persistent. We want to think about what we're thinking about or that sort of thing, but just to realize that any thought arises is just a thought, no matter how important it may seem or terrible it may seem, and just letting it go. And as we breathe, and as the body breathes, just settling into the body, into the here and now. And sort of fully inhabiting this body, our guest house. Because our body is steady in its present moment awareness being. So whenever we go adrift, whether it's from wandering mind and meditation or some trauma or issues of conscience, coming back to the body, the present moment, things can settle down. Allowing ourselves just to settle in. All of our difficulties or calamities or hopes past, present, or future, right now are secondary, if not irrelevant. And each time a thought arises, simply recognizing it and releasing it and returning to the here and now. Affording ourselves a bit of peace of mind. Because truly, whatever storms are going on, we don't have to participate in them right now. And whatever faults or errors we feel that we've made, we don't have to resolve those right now either. We can take a little break from the great flow of thoughts and responsibilities and just be for a little bit. And the more we do this, the more welcome we feel in this space of just being, the space between thoughts. It's right there between the arising of a thought, letting go of that thought, and before the next thought arises. That space. Allowing ourselves just to enjoy being present. And perhaps seeing that whatever has occurred, whatever will occur in the world with us, it flows on through just like a river. And we can stop at any point and sit and watch. And perhaps seeing from this vantage point, the past and the future look different than before. And just being here changes all that a little bit. And perhaps getting the idea that this space between stimulus and response is always there underneath everything we experience. And seeing if we can just sort of stay suspended here, right now. And now bringing into this space a sense of compassion for yourself, just in general. Because life is not easy these days, and truly it never has been, short periods of time. But this human life is very difficult at times. And bring some compassion as water coming out of a well. You can visualize it as light or a feeling or however it appears to you, a breeze, a medicine, but allowing it in. Allowing it into the entire panorama of your experience as seen from this present moment. And absorbing it as best you can, receiving it as best you can, as openly as you can. And now bringing to mind an incident from the past that was not one of our best moments. And again, relatively mild on a scale of 1 to 10. Something that you may wish that you had never done. And letting go of that moment, that thought for a moment. Just taking a look at it. And extending the compassion towards yourself at that time. And that part of you receives the compassion. Not to excuse it or explain it away or anything like that. This is not about avoiding accountability. But in complete accountability, having compassion for oneself. And you may see a part of yourself that was confused or hurt, impulsive, and that's just the way it was at that time. And bringing compassion to that as you would to yourself right now. And allowing the compassion to flow freely and absorb. And realizing if you had known at the time what you know now, you never would have done that. And your chances of doing that in the future are slim to none. And giving ourselves the grace of forgiveness, knowing that we didn't have any other option at the time, we just didn't know. We thought it would help, but we found out it really didn't. And allowing this process to come to fullness, absorbing the compassion and receiving the compassion as best you can. And if there's any leftovers, knowing that in the near future you can complete the process, or if it's complete now, that's good too. And as this exercise comes to completion, perhaps realizing now you have an ability you may not have had previously, which is to be loving and kind and compassionate toward oneself regardless of what the actions or behavior was. And sensing the fullness and the generosity of this exercise. And now bringing to mind someone who may have harmed you in the past, or someone you love. And again, relatively low on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of intensity or severity. Even if it's someone you feel you've already forgiven, if there's still a pang of pain there, it'd be a good one to work on. I'm bringing it to mind and feeling the emotions that arise with it. I'm being really clear about it, neither condemning nor excusing what happened. But being present with it as best you can, whoever this person was or is. And now bringing that compassion that you've brought into yourself a moment ago and extending it to this other person. Knowing that they may or may not have the capacity to really receive it, but we extend it anyway. Knowing that if they can't receive it now, perhaps someday they can. But we have to make the offer. And maintaining this flow of compassion through oneself to this other person or being. And it may feel we're pouring water on stone, but that's okay. It makes some time, it may take time for them to be able to receive this. But that's how great canyons and waterfalls are formed. And resisting the impulse to hold back if we can. And let the compassion flow as freely as you can. Or perhaps even sensing a connection in some way with this other being. And the harmful decisions they made. Sharing this light, this compassion, this loving kindness with someone who, at least at the time, seemed to have none at all. And now sensing the exercise coming to completion, to fullness, knowing that perhaps we've done the best we could at the moment, but in the right direction. And we have no idea what the outcome may be. All we know is that it was the right action. And as the exercise fades, returning to the space, the mindfulness space of equanimity. And resting in that place between past and future, the place between thoughts. And allowing ourselves just to be with our being for a moment. And as this whole exercise in its fullness comes to a close, absorbing it as best we can, allowing our bodies and our minds to absorb it as fully as possible, letting it sink in. So that when the bell rings again, you can bring this with you as you go about your day. And come back to it at any time.